I have always been quite drawn to Cain as a character, and I don't really know why. This was exacerbated when I was reading a book on the prose poem by a critic called Nikki Santilli, and she talked about Coleridge's unwritten poem, The Wanderings of Cain, and this is a kind of fragment. He's written this sort of synopsis of this great poem that picks up the story of Cain after he's exiled, and there's obviously nothing in Genesis about that. It's a sort of, his name never comes up again, even if he potentially does as a character, an unnamed character later in Genesis. And in Coleridge's unwritten poem, Cain has this strange little assistant, this little sort of childlike sprite who accompanies him on his journey. But essentially, it's quite a surreal kind of journey that he goes on, and whether it's a sort of journey of redemption or a journey of punishment is kind of unclear, as it is in the Bible as well. So Coleridge kind of ran with this, and it would have been this wonderful surreal poem had he written it. And I always was really attracted to that as a great story. And I love kind of unwritten things as well, and like great writers who never actually, projects that they never quite achieved. So I'd always had it in my head that I was going to go back to this and kind of try and read more about it. A kind of breakthrough moment for me was reading Ruth Malinkoff's book, The Mark of Cain, which is kind of an art history book in some ways. She goes deeply into the theology and the philosophy of it as well, but it's a lot about paintings and visual art, which gave me a lot of things to chase up, a lot of things to follow up. But she's specifically just talks about what the mark is and how there's no even, because obviously it's stated in Genesis that Cain was marked by God as punishment, or maybe by punishment, or maybe to mark him out. It's either that he is not allowed to be harmed, because the mark is put on him after he says, but Lord, everyone's going to want to kill me because I'm the first murderer, this isn't fair, you're setting me off to wander around and everyone's going to hate me. And that's when he's marked. So you could take it as if it was a mark to say that nobody's allowed, actually he's kind of a holy person, nobody's allowed to touch him, or only God is allowed to decide when he lives or dies. There's so many different interpretations of it. And there's a line about him being the first dog walker, because that was one of the rabbinical dialogues. One of the rabbis suggests that he was given a dog on a string. This was his mark, this was his sort of, what protected him. So the first person to ever keep a domesticated dog, what becomes Cain. Which struck me as so odd, and the other rabbis disagreed with him and shouted him down, but this stays, it is in the Midrash, it is there, it is sort of, it's something you can look up. I kind of love that. I love how baffled almost everybody is from the founders of the great religions onwards. Everyone's kind of baffled by this story. A real sort of first date conversation, isn't it? This is great. Yeah, and I suppose I can return to the kind of idea of tension and to argument within work and to doubt and the way of dramatising that through having different voices. But I think also I guess you write against a lack of subtlety. You write against this idea that somebody who has a faith is completely uncomplicated in their faith, and that somebody who is an atheist, which the vast majority of my friends and the people who I love probably are, really. But the idea that they are uncomplicatedly atheistic, or that I am uncomplicatedly Christian, is kind of anathema to me. So I think you try to write into the more complicated areas of that anyway, and you try to look at the fact that faith is, so much of faith is about doubt anyway. And it can't exist without that. There's I forget the scholar, but he talks about the origins of theory and practice, that often in the West, in Western thought, we have this idea that there is a theory and you put it into practice, whereas the original words being theoria and praxis, it's the other way around. You have a praxis, and by doing that thing you attain theoria, you attain a kind of enlightenment through doing that thing. So it's like having a rule of, it sort of explains ritual, it explains meditation, it actually explains prayer.
I think in light of what you said, I mean, the anagram poems become something different. Even just responding to what you're saying there, they become something much more akin to a devotional object or devotional practice.
Yeah, I hope so. I kind of worry about them on both levels. I worry about them being too religious, and I worry about them being sacrilegious. I worry about both of that. But then I think that actually that's present in the whole book, and that's kind of part of it. That without that embarrassingly religious element, and then also the fear of offending those friends of mine who are practicing Christians.
Would you show your priest your book?
Yeah, if he was interested, if he is. Turned to it in a big way when I was writing the anagrams, and I kind of needed some kind of crutch like that, and I didn't want to kind of fill the house with smoke, so it kind of helped me stop smoking altogether. There's some lovely singing going on in the background, which is good. But I got horribly addicted, so it had the reverse effect of what it's supposed to, because you're meant to use it as a transition to not smoking at all. But for me, it's actually made me smoke more and become more addicted to nicotine than I have since the age of about 17. So it's a horrible thing. So now I'm almost never without it, even though it makes me look like a kind of tragic hipster. I think that the sort of hipster journey is from sort of craft beer to vaping to board games, and I've kind of completely completed that little triptych there, which is great.